The execution of Wang Wei-qin unfolded in the middle of a crowd of soldiers and onlookers who gathered to watch the most severe legal penalty the Qing state could impose. 2 soldiers brought forth a basket holding the knives that the procedure required. Others stripped the victim and bound him by his queue to a tripod in such a way that the front of his body was fully exposed to the state executioner and his assistant. The executioner began by slicing off pieces of flesh from the victim's breasts, his biceps, and his upper thighs. Before the slicing went any further, the executioner punctured Wang's heart with a swift stab, putting the man to death. Thereafter, he proceeded to methodically sever the limbs, first at the wrists and ankles, then the elbows and knees, lastly at the shoulders and hips. His final cut severed the head from the body. A practiced executioner made roughly 3 dozen cuts to reduce his victim to an incoherent scattering of body parts, though this number could vary. Wang Wei-qin died of the sentence of Lingchi, or as it's more commonly known here in the West, death by 1,000 cuts, which is just about the worst form of execution that I can imagine. Hi, I'm Jason Shannon, and today I'm reviewing the book Death by 1,000 Cuts by Timothy Brook, Jerome Bourgon, and Gregory Blue. It is a study of the millennium-long execution technique employed by over 5 Chinese dynasties. It is a very detailed and exhaustive study, and there's a tremendous amount to be learned herein. The book was quite good, however, it was not quite what I was expecting. About half the book has nothing to do with Lingchi, but rather the European view of the practice, with a lot of implicit apologizing therein for the practice itself. That is to say that the authors were quick to point out that being sentenced to death in medieval Europe was not really the best option for a person either, and that China merely took longer to abandon death by torment. One of the most interesting things in this book was the exploration of the possible inner Asian origins of Lingchi. Its first recorded use in anything similar to what it ultimately became was during the Liao Dynasty. Its use would have been alien to the Tang and was resisted by the Song before it was officially codified into law by the Yuan. There's a special chapter devoted to Lingchi during the Ming Dynasty, where it reached its most obscene peak. This is where the difference in authorship really shows through. I've read Timothy Brook before in The Troubled Empire, China in the Yuan and Ming Dynasties, part of the History of Imperial China series, which is sort of the poor man's version of the Cambridge History of China, and of which Timothy Brook is the general editor of the series. He's actually a decent writer and has a way of cutting through the lofty blathering of the PhD for concise prose. For example, from The Troubled Empire, Zhu's desire was territorially more modest in scale. Instead, what mattered to him was transforming the battered realm he seized from the Mongols into a Taoist utopia, though it all too readily morphed into a legalist gulag. Brook is also, to the best of my knowledge, one of the leading sinologists, if not the leading sinologist, on the Ming in the English-speaking world. Indeed, in the Troubled Empire, China in the Yuan and Ming dynasties, the Ming gets much more focused than the Yuan. Here, the writing shifts in its style when you get to the Ming chapter. From the dull, scholarly rendition to the curt, concise prose, which focuses mostly on Zhu Yuanzhang and his tyrannical reign. Unfortunately, the most insidious Lingchi sentence is doled out, that of the eunuch Liu Jin, who was sentenced to 3,357 cuts to last over the course of 3 days. He expired, probably best for his sake, after only 2 days. Gets very little of a brief mentioning in this book. It's little more than a passing mention. I would have much preferred to have much more detail on that story, say instead of the opening chapter on Wang Wei-qin. I'm going to give this book 3.5 stars. If you're looking for the authoritative text on Death by 1,000 Cuts, I don't think you're going to do better than this. Have you read this book? If so, let me know in the comments and subscribe for more book and movie reviews. Until next time, I'm Jason Shannon. Good night. Wang Wei-qin died of the sentence of Lingchi, or as it's more commonly known in the West, death by 1,000 cuts, which is just about the worst form of execution that I can imagine. Marriage and children might be worst, but that tends to take too long, and I'm not sure if it's ever been codified into law.